All right, so there are a couple of different ways that we can look at using schedules, and one common way is to use what's called a between activity visual schedule. And this is a schedule that shows a number of activities and supports the transition between activities, hence between activity visual schedule. So this is really about providing information regarding what's going to happen next in the future. For many students, for many children, for many adults, these are the kinds of schedules that we use to support transition. So if you have a child or you're working with a student or an adult who has problems transitioning from one activity to the next activity to the next activity, this could very well be one of your best friends. Because it makes it much more predictable for the individual, and for some individuals reduces stress and anxiety. And again, we've talked about if you lose your schedule, you might be feeling a little bit upset, and you even have the ability to kind of find out the information or perhaps remember better than your child. So put yourself in your child's shoes when they don't know what's going on. That can be quite a stressful thing. These can also be used to increase independence and to also increase on-task behavior. Right? So when individuals know what it is that they're supposed to be doing, they can follow their schedule instead of relying on an adult to always say, now do this, now do this, now do this, now do this. And for lots of individuals, it'll just decrease disruptive or problematic behavior, particularly at those transition points. And the image here is just an example of a fairly simple schedule. This is for a morning routine and all of the activities involved in getting ready for school. And it's been made with sort of little flaps. And you close the flap every time you complete a task, and it shows the little green check marks. So things that aren't done are red, things that are done are green, and it's just a fold over tab, okay? For individuals who do require object cues, so we talked about either individuals with visual impairments or sometimes individuals who have pretty significant cognitive impairments, who can see but have significant difficulty understanding images like photographs. So I've worked with individuals who have autism and or additional intellectual disability that's significant. They don't understand when they see a photograph that that photograph actually represents something. That connection just isn't made for them. And so for those individuals, we'll use objects that are related to the activities. And so this is one example. I used this for a 5-year-old boy who was at the time, still is, but at 5, deaf, diagnosed with autism. And at 5, did not understand two-dimensional representation. He didn't understand photographs. He didn't understand picture communication symbols. We did determine through some assessment in terms of his understanding of visuals that he seemed to understand black and white picture communication symbols better than any other two-dimensional representation. He had real difficulty with photographs, and he had difficulty with colored symbols, and it seemed for him that color was just too much information. It was more information than he could process, but that he couldn't reliably even understand the black and white. So we started using object cues, and his lunch bag meant lunch, and a wooden spoon meant cooking. And we associated those things with the activity. We also associated those things with the symbols that we wanted him to learn. And within a year, he had learned what those symbols meant. And the way that we found that out was that in the morning when setting up his schedule, his SEA would randomly place all of those objects on the table. And then she would show him the picture symbol for the first activity, and he would need to find the representative object. And when he could consistently make those matches over a couple of weeks, we were like, okay, he knows what these things mean, and we could fade out those objects. Okay, so some individuals might start with objects, and we'll be able to teach them two-dimensional representations, and we fade out the objects. I've worked with other individuals who have very, very significant intellectual impairment, who require objects and likely will always require objects because they just have that much difficulty in terms of understanding and processing information. So we use objects. This is an example of another one where objects have been mounted onto cards, and in some cases, like a yogurt container or a tennis ball, cut in half so that it can be glued and mounted to a card and put up on a wall display or something like that. Right, I'm working right now with a young man who's blind and has autism, and obviously all of his everything in terms of communication and schedule support needs to be object-based. And so we spent quite a lot of time listing off all of his activities and thinking about what makes the most sense in terms of object cues, right? And this can be kind of difficult. You have to think really carefully about this. A couple of the examples I always use are bathroom and going in the car. So often if I go on a consult and somebody is using object cue symbols, and I look at what they've selected in terms of cues, I'll see for bathroom is a little dollhouse toilet. And think about the dollhouse toilet and your physical experience with a toilet. Are they at all the same? Not at all. You know it's a toilet because you know what a toilet looks like, right? And you can make that connection. Now, we're talking about an individual who either can't see or who has a pretty significant cognitive impairment. Chances are they're not making that connection. So that's probably not the best cue to use. What else could we use as a cue to represent toilet? Toilet paper, right? Toilet paper roll, something related to the toilet. Right? I'll seat kids on the toilet, and here's your toilet cue, and feel right next to you, there's the toilet paper roll. Right? So come up with something like that. Car. I've seen people use like a Hot Wheels car or a toy car. And again, think about your experience riding in a car. Does an actual toy car mimic your experience? What could we use instead? Seatbelt, right? You go to the auto wreckers or you go down to Lordco and you buy one and you hack off all of the extra belt part so that you've got the clasp and a little bit of belt, and now that's something related. Swing sets. I'll go to Home Depot and cut a little bit of chain link. If it's a swing where you hold on to the chain, right? So you have to kind of get creative. If you are working with an individual or if your child is an individual who requires object cues, go to the deaf blindness resources. Because in the land of deaf blindness, they use object cues. And they have lists and lists and lists of what are kind of conceptually appropriate object cues. So I'm always going online to deaf-blind programs and seeing the lists of things that they use for object cues and kind of borrowing that because right, they've done all the work. For individuals who are using either photographs or large picture communication symbols, we might arrange their schedule on the wall. Right, so this is an example of a schedule where all of the pictures are sequenced on the wall. They're on little dollar store stick-up hooks. And every time an activity ends, you take the symbol or the photograph and you flip it over. And you flip it over. You flip it over. Okay? So you can do that. Another thing that you can do is get photo books, those little 4x6 photo albums that you can get at the dollar store. You can put your photos or your picture symbols in that. And again, now you've got your sequence of events. The only thing about using this for a visual schedule, although this is much more portable than a schedule on the wall, the problem with symbols in a photo book is that you can't see the sequence. You'd only see one thing at a time. And we're talking about individuals who have difficulty understanding a sequence of events and holding information in their head. Right? Out of sight, out of mind. So one of the things, if you want to use something like this, cut apart all of the pages and get clear packer's tape, right? Clear packing tape that you use to seal your boxes, and tape all of your pages into an accordion fold. Right? That's at least a way of now I can fold it up like a book. It's portable, but then we can look at everything in a sequence. If you go to Chapters, every so often at Chapters, they have a photo album that kind of looks like a little coin purse, 4x6 size. And when you open it, it's an accordion fold photo album. Right, so check there. Sometimes at Michael's, right, I kind of hang out at the places where they try and get you to buy stuff while you're waiting at the cash register. I find a lot of my good visual support stuff in those places, right, because you know. So look for those kinds of things. If you are going to use photographs as opposed to picture communication symbols, you need to think about taking really good photos. Okay, so you want to think about making sure that your photos are sufficiently meaningful from the perspective of the person. So really think about aspects of the photo that will provide the most information. So if I'm thinking about a photo to represent Starbucks, I could choose a photo of Starbucks, or I could choose a photo of the drink the person gets at Starbucks. And, you know, if I get into the head of the person who has to use this schedule, I could look at this and think, you know, I know what the green awning means. And I read STARBUCKS because, frankly, I'm looking for them everywhere, right? Anytime I go anywhere, right, I want a Starbucks, where's the green awning? There we go, I'm good, right? But individuals that I'm supporting may not have that understanding, and something like the actual beverage might hold more information, right? Or at the very least, the logo might hold more information than the big building, which, again, if you're not paying attention to the certain aspects of the building, it just looks like a building. Right? So unless you're really paying attention to the green awning and Starbucks coffee, this could be any building. Right? So think about those things when you're taking pictures. When you're taking pictures, think about the critical elements of the picture. So if I'm looking to take a photo that's supposed to represent reading, well, if I look at this photo, I've got a woman on a couch with a book with some tea. She's barefoot. Right? There are all kinds of things I could take out of this. Right? Does this mean we're having tea? Does it mean I'm sitting on the couch this way? Right? I've seen individuals, if you have people in your photo, they will position themselves in whatever position the person in the photo is. Right? Because they're a bit literal. So think about those kinds of things. What's the relevant information that I want the individual to get out of this? And if it's about books, reading, right, that's the part I want to highlight, as opposed to there's tea and there's a couch and there's all kinds of other stuff. Right? So be careful about that. If you're looking for resources on visual supports in general, but especially on how to take good photos, Linda Hodgdon. Linda Hodgdon is like the first person that really did a lot of work in the area of visual support strategies, and she's an SLP from the States. And I came across Linda Hodgdon kind of early in my career, in sort of the early 90s, when she was going around and doing lectures on visual supports and so on and so forth. And so she's got a couple of really nice books on creating visual supports and using visual supports that are very nice because they are visual themselves. So it's not like reading a book. You kind of can flip through, and she's got a variety of problem scenarios, and here's how you could set up visuals to deal with it. So it's a really nice just go-to tool for ideas, and she has a nice section on how to take good pictures and all of the things you should be thinking about if you're going to use photographs, okay? For some individuals, if they're using picture communication symbols, you might be using 2-inch by 2-inch, smaller symbols, which is nice because they're more portable. We can kind of use them in different ways. One of the things that you can do, and it's very hard for you to see actually on the slide, but all of these symbols are arranged in a plastic slide pocket page. So some of us don't remember because you were not born then, but thankfully I look around the room and go, I'm not the only one who would remember, but you remember the old-fashioned slide carousels, photographic slides? Oh yeah, see, yay, I'm not the only one. Those slide carousels, you could get plastic pages that you would store all of your photographic slides in. Well, those still exist, even though we don't use slides anymore, really. So you can go to a photo store or a photo department, and they come in 8.5 by 11 sheets. So it's like a piece of paper sized, but you can put all of your symbols in. 2-inch by 2-inch symbols are actually the same size as photographic slides. And you can use that to sequence your images. So what's hard for you to see is that there's a clear set of pockets that all of these symbols are sitting in, and you can arrange your symbols that way. I often will use this for high school-aged kids who don't want their peers to know that they have a visual schedule. Because it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet, I can put all their symbols in it. We put it in a binder. They're walking through school with a binder like everybody else, right? So for kids who are like, I don't want people to know, but yes, I need it, they can have it, but right, it's normative. The other thing that I've done with this before is I'll just cut that sheet in half, right? If I only need 8 spots for a schedule, we can cut it in half, fold it up, stuff it in a pocket. Okay, so it's pretty adaptable that way. The only thing about this is that you have to have relatively decent fine motor skills to get the little pictures in and out of the pockets. Right? So if you're working with young kids, you have to be prepared to kind of help them out with that a little bit. Or the other thing that I've done is in the actual plastic pocket itself, I'll cut a V in the plastic pocket so that you can grab onto the symbol a bit more easily. Okay? And these things are cheap. right? You can get a pack of 10 for probably less than $10 at this point because nobody uses slide projectors anymore. Right, so you can get a whole bunch of them and just kind of stockpile. I think I've got a stockpile somewhere in my office. The other thing you can use are just binders. Binders and Velcro. My hint about Velcro, don't go to the store and buy a little teeny package of Velcro for $15 or however much they're making you pay for it now. You can order online big rolls of sticky back. Get sticky back Velcro, not the Velcro that you need a tube of glue for. Doesn't work as well. Sticky back Velcro. You can also get the dots if you don't want to spend all your time cutting Velcro, right, and gumming up your scissors. You can get Velcro dots, but order, I think they're 40-foot rolls of Velcro that you can get for about $45 or $50 online if you order direct from Velcro or a Velcro distributor. So just type in, right, Velcro, roll of Velcro into Google and you'll get a whole list of places that you can buy. And at the end of the day, it is way, way cheaper to do that than to run to Staples or wherever and get a little package of Velcro every time you need some. They're charging an arm and a leg for that, okay? With Velcro binders, you just take a binder. You can use a small binder or a big binder, whatever makes sense for the person, and put Velcro on the front cover, and that's where you're going to build your schedule. And on the inside of the binder, you have a whole bunch of Velcro, and that essentially houses all of your symbols. So that's, right, that's your kind of symbol library is on the inside. You pull symbols off and put them on the front cover to build your schedule, and as each activity ends, you rip that symbol off, put it back inside the binder to signify that that activity is done, and then you go to the next activity. And then finally, the Portacom system. Anybody seen the Portacom before? A couple of you, a few of you? My students who just saw them in class this week. Poor things, you get to hear it all again. So the Portacom was developed out of a mom's need. So I was teaching at the School for the Deaf, and I had two students, twins, two girls, both of them were profoundly deaf. Both of them were diagnosed with autism, and mom was a single mom and had her hands very, very busy. Wow. And the girls both engaged in quite a bit of problem behavior. And they received consultative services from CBI consultants. And one of the things that they implemented right away was a visual schedule, and that was very, very effective. What they were using for a visual schedule were the slide pockets. Fold up, put in a bag. In fact, the girls had little tiny purses, right, change purses that had a little string, and they were very girly, and so they put their schedules in that. Which was all well and good, except that mom was carrying around a binder of symbols, and the girls were signing. They were learning to sign, so they'd have their schedule in one hand, and they'd be trying to sign, and then they'd put their schedule down, and then they'd say something, and they'd walk off and not have their schedule, and mom has to have her hands on both girls because they would take off, and of course, in different directions, never in the same direction at the same time, and they're not coming back if you call them, right? Even if they could hear you, they probably wouldn't, but they couldn't hear mom anyway, so mom has to keep a hold on them. So it was very difficult. So we were kind of talking one day about, what do we do about this? What do we do about this? And we looked at each other and went, Velcro, that's what we do about this. And mom sews. So mom went and got some material and started designing prototypes, and we tested them on a few kids, including hers, and she created the Portacom system. You wear it, ideally the child wears it around his or her waist, and when you open it up, it's got cloth that Velcro sticks to, and you build your schedule in that. And it's got a little zipper pocket, so as things finish, you take the symbol and put it into the pocket. You can get extra pages, so you can add other kinds of visual support. So I've put things like contingency maps for specific situations in there. If I know we're going to a restaurant, I'll put a restaurant visual menu in there. The girls were starting to use drawing to communicate as they were developing their sign skills. Occasionally, they'd want to say something and they didn't have the signs for it, they didn't know how to say it. And so they used drawing. So mom got some white cloth and some clear plastic and sewed essentially a whiteboard page. It's a cloth whiteboard that also attaches in there, and you stick a dry erase pen on it. And now, in the heat of the moment, you need to convey something visually, whether it's me to the kid or the kid back to me. We have not paper, but a whiteboard, right, which is very useful. The other thing besides daily schedules is to think about weekly and monthly calendars, right, providing information about long-term stuff. And again, your child doesn't necessarily have to understand about days, weeks, and months yet to start exposing them to monthly calendars. So this is just a great big desk pad calendar from Staples. You can usually get them for a couple of bucks. And what I typically will have families do if they're going to use a monthly calendar at home is get one of those little drawer containers for nuts and bolts and nails and that kind of stuff, where you've got a little plastic drawer for everything. Walmart has them, Home Depot has them. And we'll make a bunch of symbols for the various activities, 1 inch by 1 inch, and each drawer has a symbol in it. So one drawer has home symbols, and one drawer has school symbols, and one drawer has library symbols, and so on. And then at the beginning of every month, you sit down with the child, and you put the big events in the calendar. What are school days? What are home days? If there's respite, which are the respite days? Swimming lessons, what day do we go swimming? That kind of stuff, big picture stuff. And then you work your way through the monthly calendar. At the end of every day, you cross off the end of the day, right? A young man who's now in his mid to late 20s, but I taught him when he was in kindergarten. He's now 6 foot, almost 6'10". I used to like lift him up and swing him, and that doesn't happen anymore. We started a monthly calendar with him when he was 6, and we started it at school. And he came in one day to school, and we'd only started to expose him. He was the kid who started off using object cues. We'd transitioned him to picture communication symbols. We had a big binder full of symbols. He was just kind of learning what a lot of the symbols meant. And he came in one day, and he pulled the book off the shelf, which was not something that he typically did. We gave him the symbols that he needed to schedule. But he took this book off the shelf, and he kind of was flipping through the pages. And I thought, well, how interesting. Let's see where this goes. And so I waited for a few minutes, and he looked through, and he pulled out a symbol, a hand-drawn symbol, because there was no PCS, for Science World. So I had kind of drawn a circle with the little slash marks, made a triangle on the bottom, and he handed it to me. It was like, okay, well, it's, you know, the 6th day of a brand new school year. We can't kind of drop everything today and go to Science World, although we're really working on, like, if you ask for something, we give it to you, because, you know, you've just learned to ask for stuff. But we can't do it. And so I'm smiling and nodding, yes, but walking to the calendar slowly, and thinking, we're not going to be able to do this in September. This isn't going to be possible. But let's put it on a day in October. And I just kind of glanced at the calendar and went, when do I think either I or an EA could take this kid to Science World? Yeah, probably this day. And so we taped it up there. And he was okay with that. It's all right. So the next day he comes in, and he goes immediately to that calendar, and he lifts up the page, and he points to Science World, and I nod yes, and he puts the page down. He did that every single day, and the day of Science World, boy, he came running in. So clear to me, right? Now, if I had made an assumption, my assumption would have been he did not yet understand. And he told me very clearly he did understand. And if I'd never even provided the opportunity, I never would have known that he understood, okay? Families started doing a monthly calendar at home as well. So what were school days, home days, respite days, all that kind of stuff. And every month, Mom would sit down with him and plan out the calendar. Well, he's now 20-something. And at the end of every month, he rips off the month that's finished. He gets his container that has all of his symbols, and he knows much of the structure of his monthly schedule. He knows what days he goes to his day program. He knows what days he does various things. He glues everything onto the page, and when he's done what he knows, he goes and he gets his mom, and he brings her to the table. Essentially, is there something else I need to know here? Right? He has very limited communication skills. He has very limited sign language skills. He communicates mostly via the picture exchange communication system, but he's also very bright. Right? And so he remembers much of what typically happens, and then, yeah, okay, Mom, anything else that I should know? So use stuff like this and use it early. Just because they don't understand it now doesn't mean that they won't eventually, and they'll never understand it if we don't expose them to it. Right? So expose them to it. Basic information.